Good morning. Good morning to you all. Good morning. It looks like everyone's filtering in pretty quickly, so we'll get started here in a minute.
Don't forget, get your stuff. The only thing I gotta order is the ones that I sold, they're cheap. Like, we were gonna be going through the same thing. I need to order a heavy duty.
Okay. Good morning to you all.
Morning.
Good morning.
I hope you're all doing well. And I realize that I am throwing a lot out at you, but we will hop into this. And again, I'm going to mute you all, but even if you're unmuted, if you have a question, unmute yourself and let me know Feel free to speak up. I don't mind being interrupted, all right? Okay. So hopping into this thing. This tool is called an FMEA for short, or Failure Mode and Effects Analysis. And this thing is really useful. And it looks kind of like a big behemoth, I don't know. It looks a little more intimidating than it really is. What you do with this is see that where it talks about process step or input. Once you do a process map and you've got your process map all out, you just fill in the blanks here with those individual steps. Like if we're talking about making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? It's talking about, put the bread in, get the bread, put the peanut butter on one side, put the jelly on one side, all of those things. That's what that is. But then for each of the steps, what this is, again, it's not a clever name, failure mode and effects analysis, gives you the opportunity to talk about what is the potential failure for this. And I'll say the purpose of this tool is to basically identify your weak spots. And feel free to unmute yourself and raise your hand or tell me something. Have you ever worked on anything where you're sure you know what's wrong? I mean, I know I have, right? Maybe it's just because my bossy nature, but there's been the cases where I've worked on something and go, I know that's the weak point, that's the problem. And I've filled out an FMEA and done something on a process and found out, it is a problem, but there's something else that I didn't think was as big of a deal as maybe I thought was. And the FMEA helps jump that out. So again, the FMEA is talking you for each step of your process, talks about what your potential failure is, and then how severe, and again, and it talks about how severe those potential effects are. What are the potential effects of that failure? So potential failure mode is I'm out of bread. And each step can have more than one failure mode, right? There may be different reasons why something could go wrong. Now, do you have to sit and do something for every single, drill down to every tiny detail? No, absolutely not. And it's probably a waste of your time. But if you notice there are a couple that really jump out at you, I'd list them just to get them in there. So again, talks about what could go wrong, what are the effects of that problem going wrong, and then that severity column here, that gives you a point to give it a number, basically rating it scale 1 to 10. And usually I recommend you do odd. And again, if anyone does an FMEA for their project, I'll work with you with this. Usually when you assign stuff, just because it helps numbers really pop. Traditionally people do odd numbers and they skip. So like a 1, 5, and a 10. For instance, so if something's low severity, give it a 1. If it's medium, give it a 5, and obviously high severity, 10. Throw in the says, making my sandwich, I'm out of jelly. Well, if I'm making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that's a pretty big effect, right, for that type of sandwich. So that would be a 10. Whereas I have grape jelly instead of strawberry jelly, and I can exchange it out. Maybe that's a 5. It's not as big of a deal, or something really minor, whatever that may be. And then potential causes is just that what went wrong, what potentially went wrong. Again, in the sandwich arena of things, which I realize is not remotely a professional example, but that's the example I'm going with. Potential cause, maybe I forgot to buy grape jelly, or maybe I forgot to buy bread, or whatever that may be. And then the occurrence is how often would that happen, rated again, same scale, 1, 5, 10. How often would that potentially happen? Then again, occurring controls are just that. Are there controls in place? If there are controls in place, what are they? And then the next one is the detection. So you got controls in place. How easy is it to detect? Now I am going to unmute you all for a moment, because I'd like to ask the question that hopefully is a pretty simple question. Why would it be important? Hopefully I unmuted y'all. Maybe I didn't. Why would it be important, or why would we care about how easy it is to detect if there's an issue? In other words, whatever controls you have in place, why do we care about rating the detection on the controls?
So we don't do the same mistake over and over again?
Right. Yep, that's part of it. Anyone else have anything else you can add to that? So if I put a control in place, but I have to really dig to, like, oh, I've got a control, I put an audit in place so I know whether or not something's going to go wrong. But that audit doesn't run automatically, or I don't get notifications automatically, and it's a self-done audit, and it's if I remember to do the audit, or whoever's in charge of remembering to do the audit. And, oh, I got busy and I didn't get the audit done I was supposed to do this week, whatever. So that kind of thing is only as good as, quite frankly, as the process you have in place. And so part of the reason with the detection is being able to understand that. Sorry, I got to mute y'all because there's feedback somewhere. Maybe anyway, part of it is you got to be able to know when something is wrong, and if you don't, it's almost as if you didn't have an audit or a control in place. Does that make sense? So, and then that last column, that RPN, and I realize it's all condensed in there, that RPN, what that does is when you assign a number, again, a 1, a 5, or a 10, to the severity column, the occurrence column, and the detection column, those are all formulas, and the RPN basically gives it a total number. So then at the end, you're looking at that RPN, that last number, to see what each on that failure modes and effects analysis worksheet, you're looking at it and you can see what's going on with that. So, gosh, sorry, I've got stuff all over the place. So again, if you've got all these different processes, you've got all your processes in place, you go across and each one ends up with a number assigned to it after you filled out the whole form, then it's like, yeah, you know, one particular process, I didn't think it was that severe, and gosh, it turns out it's a little more severe than I realized, or, you know, a bigger problem than I thought of, or vice versa, or geez, I thought it was going to be this huge big deal, but really something else is just as big of a deal or whatever. So the point of doing an FMEA, and I'll be honest, this is a tool that I probably use pretty regularly. I don't necessarily fill it out every single time, totally, completely. Obviously, for the purposes of certification process, you want to try and fill it out pretty completely. And again, I will be there to help you if it's something you end up needing to do. But this is a tool that I'll pull up every once in a while when I've got something going on, and I'll go in and rate it, especially when I'm waffling back and forth like, this is a problem, this is a problem, I'm not really sure. Throw it in there. It's really easy to do. Do you have to sit and flush it out really full every single time? Not necessarily, once you know how to use it, right? Again, it's a tool like any other tool that you can pull out and use to help you. One of the reasons I use this a fair amount is because, again, I like to be confident when I'm talking with someone and I'm telling them this is a problem, this is an issue, or whatever. I want to be confident about what it is and give somebody more than just a feeling. That makes sense. Because again, like back before, like I mentioned before, that if you walk up to someone, whether it's a client, your manager, your team, whoever that may be, and say, you know, guys, I think we need to change something because it just doesn't feel like it's going to work. As opposed to, we need to change this because I've analyzed this, this, and this, and these are the results I received. And I can tell that, you know, by well, I can be tell because quite frankly, I was told by the data that these are the issues. That's a much stronger argument and for getting something done and for helping people understand something needs to change, improve, move, whatever that may be. Does that make sense? Hopefully. And again, it's a really great tool. I put a Pareto chart on here, and a Pareto chart is a tool for Lean Six Sigma. And again, this is basic. Pareto in particular is basic math stuff. This is not high-tech stuff by any stretch of the imagination. And this is, quite frankly, if you're in Excel, there's a button to create a Pareto chart in Excel. Pareto charts are not hard to do. And again, sometimes the different tools kind of present themselves as being better opportunities to work for individual projects. And again, I'll work with each of you that are choosing to certify so we can determine what makes the most sense for you. What a Pareto chart shows is there's a rule, and I apologize, I don't remember the exact name of the rule, but it's an 80-20 rule, and some of you may have heard it, that 80% of the things that are going on cost 20% of the problems. or I'm sorry, vice versa. 20% of the things going on cause 80% of the problem. So those vital few is what they call that. So anything above the line, those are like the high risk areas, right? So if you're categorizing, I've got all these different things like in this example chart, right? These are my potential things going on, and really I can see it becomes like, you know, again, back to peanut butter and jelly example. You know, if you don't have jelly, you don't have peanut butter. Those are pretty big risks. Let's see, I've got something beeping at me. Anyway, want to make sure that y'all understand that, again, all of these different kinds of tools are just that. They're tools to help show you what you're doing, analyzing the data you've got. And again, back to that comment that I made before of you need to know what you're analyzing, right? You don't want to be like that team that I mentioned that they're being analyzed and they're being, their KPIs were on something that they had no control over. So you want it to be something specific to whatever process you're working on, if that makes sense. And again, feel free to stop me, slow me down if I say something that doesn't make sense for you guys. Another tool, and this tool is part of a control part of that DMAIC, that define, measure, analyze, improve, control. The control piece, that last piece, is something pretty basic, a standard operating procedure, SOP. Who hopefully you all have at some point in your careers worked with an SOP, whether you've written one, you've just had to use one, you've seen one peripherally, so there's ones gathering dust somewhere and you still do whatever it is you do, whatever that may be. Is there, so I'll ask, is there anyone who has not used an SOP or seen an SOP? Hopefully everyone has. Because again, standard operating procedure is really just that. What is our standard? The more you standardize, it's important, right? And I want to stop and unmute y'all because I feel like I'm talking to a blank screen here for a sec. Because I want to ask y'all, why is it, I'll ask first, why is it important that we standardize?
Last Monday.
Anybody? Why would it be important that we standardize?
So it took, I say, 2 hours.
Nobody?
So that way we have a process in place. So if, for example, I was to be away from work or off, someone else can just follow the standard operating procedures written for that specific task. And
Right.
that way anyone can complete the task with success.
Right, exactly. And I'll ask as well, have any of you ever been trained or had to train somebody without an SOP in place? Probably most of us at some point, right? And then conversely, have you ever trained someone or had to be trained when there was one in place? Probably most of us, hopefully at some point as well. It's a lot easier when you bring on new people if you've created a standard, which is not to say you're going to throw a couple pieces of paper at someone and say, here's the SOP, figure it out. But it's a tool. Again, all of these things are tools to help. We have a lot of processes throughout SMART that a lot of different people do, correct? Whether, regardless of the state, regardless of the office, regardless of the client, you're doing some very similar things. If we have someone who's basically, I won't say reinvented the wheel, but come up with a way to do something that's much more efficient, we want to know about that. And just as conversely as we want to know about, if we've got someone who's really muddling along, they don't know all the steps to do something, they're kind of figuring it out, but in the course of reviewing maybe their work, they're missing things, which quite frankly, maybe that's just lack of training or they didn't understand something, right? We want to know about that as well. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to have whatever you're producing, whether it's a service, whether it's a product, whatever that is, we want it to be as consistent as possible. So if you don't have standards on the front end, you're not going to be consistent on the back end. Does that make sense? And I know I'm really talking a lot about an SOP, and an SOP hopefully should be a pretty much a no-brainer. But there are a lot of organizations that don't have them at all. And let's be honest, SMART has a few, but not nearly enough. And this is working through all this Lean Six Sigma is an opportunity to identify areas where we need an SOP. This is something we do a lot. We're fixing problems, we're fixing issues. Let's standardize the process and make sure everyone's been trained on the process. And by the way, here's a training document that we'll work from. That's what where SOP value really jumps out. One thing, if you'll notice that second bullet point on this slide, it should be reviewed and signed off by the entire team. For instance, there's not a lot of value if I create an SOP for a process, pass it off to everyone, say, okay, here y'all, here's all your instructions, here's your SOP, go off and work. And I never consult you at all. And this is not my process. It's a process I don't work, but I'm gonna go in and fix something. By the same token, if you're a project working, again, you're all project managers in the context of Lean Six Sigma, and quite frankly, a lot of the different things you do, right? You want to talk with the teams you're working with. You want to talk with whoever works, whatever project you're working with when you're developing an SOP, so that you make sure first of all, you haven't missed anything. They're involved in the process as well, because quite frankly, teams that are involved in building an SOP and writing an SOP, which is not to say they have to sit and write everything out, but they're involved in the process, they're much more likely to actually use them and follow them. And which is not to say I'm going to pull out an SOP every single time, something I've already been doing for a year or two or however much time. I'm going to sit there and follow along step by step. But no, you're going to pull it out and verify that it works. You may, geez, if it's a process you don't do a ton, you may pull it out just to follow along and use it like a checklist to make sure you haven't forgotten anything, right? Fingers crossed. So that you're not forgetting stuff. So again, whatever you're doing, the output of whatever you're doing, whether again you're building something or you're providing a service, and in our business we're providing a service, right? That we're consistent, so that Bob, employee number 1, comes in, gets the same high level of service that Mary, another employee, comes in the next day, would get the same high level of service. That's what we want, is everyone who walks through our door feels like they've got really the best from us. And that even think about our internal processes too. We want everyone to think that, quite frankly, we're providing the very best we can. So have I beaten that SOP horse to death? Yeah. All right, let's switch on over. So I want to talk about Kaizen. Kaizen means improvement in Japanese. And again, this comes from Lean Six Sigma. I'm not going to ask y'all to learn a whole new vocabulary for this, but Kaizen is a really, really common term, to the point where it's used more often than improvement in Lean Six Sigma. And it just means that improvement, it's making improvements to something. And along those lines, and again, I'm not going to read this whole slide to you, and I'll send all this out. A lot of companies, and I actually toured a company here in Utah that was signed on to, and Kelly and a couple other people told me, who toured it already, and they said, Sean, you're going to really like it. These guys use Lean, and they have Kaizen events, and they do this and do that. Well, you want to understand what all this means. When I toured the company, I asked a couple really basic Lean questions, like, oh, you use Kaizen, so you're making improvements and you're doing things. I just talked about really basic, like 101 definition stuff. And the couple people I talked to, their eyes kind of glazed over. They had no idea what I was talking about, which told me that that company had taken a couple terms that they know are kind of like hot topics in the business world, and they've incorporated them into their business, and they've given them certain things titles, but they haven't explained the concepts to their employees. And that, which quite frankly has very little value, if any. So what a Kaizen event is, and I think this next event, basically, all a Kaizen event is, it sounds fancy, but really what a Kaizen event is, and y'all have probably participated in one at some point or another, is getting people together, whether it be stakeholders, managers, whoever's involved in a particular process. Hey, everyone, let's try and get together in the same place, even if it's virtual or whatever it may be. And let's talk through, what are the problems? Like those 3 questions I mentioned yesterday. What's going well? What are the challenges? And if you had that magic wand, what would you fix? And start writing it out and come up with lists. This is what we know we need to work on. This is, and okay, and what are we going to do from there? It's not just coming up with your list. That's what a Kaizen event is, basically. Even if it hasn't specifically been called a Kaizen event, have any of you ever been involved in something where, even informally, something where you've been asked to come, hey, let's all come together and talk about how we can make something better, a process, something that we work on, we can make it better? Anybody? No one's ever even had a manager come up to you and say, hey, let's talk about something went wrong. What can we do to fix it, or how can we improve something?
I have.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for a doctor's office, and I was the manager there.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a fairly new staff with a bunch of untrained people, and we had 2 different scopes of businesses that we provided, and we needed to figure out how we were going to both make each different type of service functional, because they were totally opposites. One, we were an opioid pain clinic on one side, and the other one, we were a drug treatment center.
Right.
So we had to try to figure out how we were going to make both sides work. And if any of our opioid patients became addicted, then we put them into our other clinic to try to help them out to become sober and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we had multiple meetings all the time, and I put together many SOPs for different practices and different things, because we would run into a lot of different problems. And we were also getting certified to be, and unfortunately I can't remember the name, but you had to have an SOP for absolutely everything, from the way that you put your medicines in the refrigerator, to the way you stocked your shelves, to everything in the bathrooms that had to be a certain level, a certain inch apart from each other, absolutely every way for the state to come in and actually certify us as a certain type of clinic. And we passed. They said our SOPs were something like they've never seen. So.
And that's fantastic. And how powerful is that, right, Cindy? Because to be able to have a regulatory agency, like whatever agent that may be, in our world, it's OSHA a lot, right? To have them walk through our doors and say, let me see your processes, and you say, oh, not only can I show you, here's the, whether electronically or physically, piece of paper showing this is what we do, this is who's been trained on it, this is what they've signed off on, these are the processes we follow, and not only that, whoa, aren't we fabulous? Here are the controls we have in place to ensure our processes are consistent, that we're producing a quality product, service, whatever that may be.
Yeah, it took us about 7 months, but we did it. We had a huge SOP book, and the state came in and they took it with them, and then they came back and they made a few changes. We corrected them, and then we were certified.
Right. And that's great too in the process if you're going through getting some sorts of certifications and things like that through for the government. But also if you have a problem, and say you had a problem in our world, it tends to be OSHA. OSHA walks through your door. If you've got all of that kind of stuff in place, as opposed to not having anything, and you go, well, this is what we do, and I kind of show, oh, I need this information. Okay, let me dig for it. And they get that kind of response, and they see disorganization versus we're really organized. You've got the processes. And not only do you have SOPs, they're not just some dusty thing that you created and has sat on a shelf for a year, but they're actually a living document that, whoa, gosh, people get shocked when I say this, they get updated or at least reviewed every year. Sometimes you need to tweak them a little bit, sometimes you don't, but you at least review them. Quite frankly, you're going to impress them, and if there are any issues, they're going to be much happier with your and quite frankly much nicer with you if you've got that to back you up. I cannot stress that enough, and thank you for bringing that up, Cindy, because that's a perfect point of, man, when you're dealing with regulatory agencies, you need to have your ducks in a row, and I don't think anybody thinks that's a surprise to anybody, right?
Right.
I mean, you just got to have it. And again, previous to working with SMART, I worked for Federal Occupational Health, which is a federal agency, part of Health and Human Services. And you think if you've ever worked for a company that's got a lot of SOPs and things like that, or a military, anything like that, you know, if anyone's ever seen a military SOP, which is this massive amount of work, which is not even remotely where I suggest we go, but an SOP is, I'll back up. I had someone tell me relatively recently, someone within SMART actually, who told me SOPs are outdated and they confine us too much. We do too many things and we need flexibilities in an SOP. My reply to that was a smile. Because when I have someone say something like that to me, that tells me they don't understand what the purpose of an SOP. An SOP is not to lock you down so much that you don't have any flexibility in something like sales, right? Cindy's in the world of sales, Carlos, right? In the world of sales, it's not like I do exactly this for something like a sale, making a sale, versus I need to onboard somebody and need to do their I-9 process. Well, there's certain things you have to do, right? Because that's what the government requires.
Right.
So there's differences between processes, just like there's differences between SOPs. And they're as flexible, and I say this all the time, all of these tools, and an SOP is a tool, is as flexible as the piece of paper you write it on, whether it's a physical piece of paper or it's a virtual document. And again, one of my personal preferences, and it's up to you and your teams how you treat them, but my personal preference when you create documents like this is you have it, even if you have them physically printed out, make sure you have at least an electronic copy that everyone on the team or everyone who works that particular process has access to. So that when you make a change or an update, you're not printing out 20 more copies of an SOP. You could just send out an email saying, hey, everybody, an update's been made to this SOP. We've made the changes. Maybe it's changes. You had a Kaizen event and you talked about it, right? Or maybe some new regulatory thing came up, OSHA or whoever said, no, now you need to do something extra. Okay, well, we'll add that to our SOP, make sure we keep our processes up to date. That's a great way to roll that out to your staff and to your people. All right. So again, Kaizen events, just really briefly, and I talk about this because consider having these, and you can have these formally as part of your project certification, but you can also have them just, hey guys, let's get together and let's do a really short Kaizen event. I mean, they can be an hour long, they can be, I've seen Kaizen events that have been 2 days. depending on what you're doing. I was part of a Kaizen event for an organization I worked for. God, this has been a really long time ago, but we did a Kaizen event because they were restructuring a whole division, and this was a multi-billion-dollar company, so a division was thousands of people. So they were talking about, okay, let's take some people from different areas and let's talk about restructuring. Let's do it as a Kaizen event so we can figure out, what do we need to do? Are we forgetting anything? If we change something here, are we going to break something here? Having those kinds of things. But of course, having any kind of an event like that, of course you have to appoint a facilitator, right? That should be pretty much a no-brainer. Then of course you want to make sure the leadership's engaged. Why would we care if the leadership's engaged?
It's not going to work if they're not.
Right.
Because if the leadership is not engaged,
No, I'm not mute.
No, I can hear you.
oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I was saying, if the leadership is not engaged, then that wouldn't bring much motivation to the group. Like, things wouldn't be done in a timely manner, they'll be slacking. And I guess it's just like a group thing.
Well, you're exactly right. And like for you guys in Georgia, yeah, let's be honest. If you guys are all excited about, let's do this event, let's brainstorm and let's do this and let's get together and do this, and Carlos is kind of like, yeah, you guys can go ahead, but that's fine. I got a lunch appointment or whatever, right? Which I don't think Carlos is going to do, right? But say if he did something like that, you guys would be going, all right, well, how much traction are you going to get if you come up with all kinds of fantastic ideas? He walks into the door after his lunch appointment and sits down at his desk and is like, okay, whatever, and not engaged. First of all, it's going to kind of take the steam out of what you want to do, right? As well as you may even just say, oh, that's not even really important. So it's helping making sure that everyone involved needs to understand that it's important, but then again, like the next line says, you got to also understand the limits. I mean, obviously we're not creating world peace here with anything. And sometimes Kaizen events are made these big sweeping changes, like this thing I talked about where they restructured a whole this big massive division. And sometimes like, hey, we've just got something that's been a continual problem and we've never had the time to really sit and figure it out. We're going to set aside a time, whether it's a half an hour, or a half a day, or whatever that amount is. We're going to call it a Kaizen event because quite frankly, it's fun. We'll get it going, and we're going to brainstorm and get everybody together and figure out what's going on and see if we can come up with solutions. Ahead of time too, you need to again, define success, meaning before you start, you need to decide what is the goal of your event. Is it to solve an issue, to restructure something, to change something, whatever that is? You need to define what your success is. And then of course, deciding your schedule and all that, that's pretty much no-brainer stuff. Okay. Next is SWOT analysis is the next.
We still have that.
Yeah, if she can do second shift 1 to 10 for at least a month, and then I come.
Hey, guys, SWOT analysis.
Huh?
Have any of you ever done a SWOT analysis? Sorry, I paused because I was getting a lot of chatting. SWOT analysis?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Tell me like a while ago.
I have done SWOT analysis on a semi-regular basis. Again, identifying, just like it says, strength, weaknesses. I'm going to mute.
Mira, se está manchando mi shoe.
I don't know who's talking, so I'm going to mute y'all for a second. Unmute yourselves when you're ready to talk. Again, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? Pretty basic, generally done in that 4-block thing, although you can just write up a list, whatever works for you. again, do what works for you. I've seen people as well in the course of doing even a Kaizen event, doing a SWOT analysis in this. One activity that I've done before is hand everybody a stack of Post-it notes. Pass everything around the table, because sometimes people are a little timid. All right, everyone's got your Post-it notes. Okay. Right now, everyone's got your pen and paper. Write down what strengths you think we have for this process. You can write them all on one Post-it note or individual ones on individual Post-it notes, whatever. Okay, do that. All right, same thing with weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Go through, do all 4, then throw them all up, whether it's on a wall, whatever it is, or just sit and go through and read them, compile them, and you end up with this big list, and you see, hey, so that helps you identify what's going well. It's particularly if you start asking people what's going well, and you get the, I don't know, you get the, I guess it's going okay. I think everything's pretty much okay. I don't really know there's any problems. When you get those kind of really wishy-washy responses, doing something like a SWOT analysis is good, because it really helps kind of poke at the process and pick things apart and get through that. So again, whether you're walking through into a potentially new client for the first time, you want to be able to do that for them. Are they going to be a good fit for the company, right? Am I going to be able to get the margins I want? Are they going to be as a good safety partner? Are they going to be a good partner operationally? All of those kinds of things. You in sales, I know you're already doing versions of SWOT analysis, if not full-on SWOT analysis already. We need everyone else to be able to be doing that kind of thing and be thinking about that, even as you bring someone in, a potential employee, and you bring them in. You should be doing a form of SWOT analysis, and truly you really are, because when someone comes in and sits down and says, I want to apply for a job, you're basically doing a version of this, because you're saying, are they a right fit? Do they have the information I need? Do they have the skills I need, to fit into a particular role? So you're really doing a form of that already. Does that make sense? Maybe, kind of, sort of. All right, I'm going to whip through this because I feel like I'm taking too much time talking about all this. So 5S, I'll talk a little bit more in detail about 5S, but I'll just go throw this up here. This is an example. Some of you may have seen something like this before. If I asked you all to count from 1 to 50, and with these numbers like this, it probably take a little bit of time, right? And I'm not going to stay here and make you do it. But if I organized it, it's a little easier, even though they're different fonts, different sizes, all of that. You'd know that everything's there, and you'd even notice if something's missing, right? This is kind of a no-brainer example. 5S is, and I'll get to a slide that talks about what all the different S's stand for. The initial terms came from Lean originally, are Japanese terms, but that they've come up with S equivalents in English as well. But basically, it's form of cleaning and organizing, both physically, like something like this, a warehouse situation, a workplace situation, in office settings, in all of that, where it's cleaned, right? Where the difference between, obviously, if you had people out in a warehouse and they were picking and everything was all over the place and said, just go for it, good luck, that would never happen, right? Everything's got to be organized if they go pick. That's kind of warehouse 101, just as it should be for everything else. And again, that's just examples of clean stuff. Offices too, though. I mean, I think pretty much most of us have seen like those pegboards, mechanics and all that have that, where, everything's up there. Sometimes they have labels, sometimes they don't, but you can look over really easily and see, again, something's missing or not. That's what that's about. And again, this picture again, we use 5S in our homes. This is a form of Lean in our house. And part of 5S is the first S in 5S is, I'm not going to go through the Japanese terms, is sort. In other words, decide what you have. What do I have? Do I really need it? And going through and picking it apart. Part of that too is in companies that do formal 5S, they'll go so far as to do these tags, a red tag. Basically you tag something, anything that is something that you don't think you're going to need. How many offices do we have with that closet that has filled with junk that probably hasn't been touched in a year and a half, right? That happens pretty commonly. And then every blue moon somebody gets tired of it and they go through and gut the thing, whatever, stuff gets chucked, whatever. If you have a 5S process in place, you're regularly going through your inventory of what you've got, whether it's storage stuff, cleaning supplies, your desks, whatever that may be, and looking at it and saying, do I really need this? If it is, is it something I should just, it's broken, I should just need to be tossed. I'm not sure I need it, so I'm going to hold it, or I'm going to just move it back to where it needs to be. Oh, it was taken from another spot and it needs to just be put back. That's what that is. And some companies use this formally. I've seen some people just buy red stickers and they'll just use a sticker on something to say this has been red tagged, basically, and create a holding area for something when it's a hold area, and then it's either donated or whatever, but for a specific period of time. And sometimes it's just something like this where it's, you know, a shelf, a corner of a closet in offices where it's kind of cubicle farms. I've seen them just use one cubicle. In warehouses, it's been a corner of a warehouse. It's all kinds of different things they do. We're like, this is the holding area. This is the stuff we think we don't need anymore, but we're going to hold it for a while just to verify maybe there's some other use for something that wasn't realized, and then it can be pulled back out otherwise after a certain period of time, and you determine the period of time, then it gets tossed. And again, 5S is a tool with the process. You can do this virtually too. I've seen someone do this with files, shared files where people had created folders, and how many of us have done this where you've got folders within folders within folders within folders on your computer, and you're clicking through 4 or 5, however many times to get to a document that you go into all the time. How efficient is that? Think about that as well. That's form of, you can 5S that. So again, let me throw this up. This is what the 5S's are. And again, I put the Japanese terms on there, but not really expecting anyone to understand the Japanese, because quite frankly, I don't memorize them. Really, it's sort, straighten or set. So you sort things out, you straighten them out, you shine or sweep, which means you organize, you really clean out. Then you standardize. How is it going to be organized? And then, of course, that last one is sustain. You got that sustainability piece, right? Got to keep it going. Okay, and again, so examples, just a few quick examples. Anyone who's walked through any type of facility where they've got a very specific type, like pharmaceutical, medical type of production facilities, they look pretty organized. Of course, they're pretty clean, they're pretty organized, as opposed to, like, we have a client here that makes pies, and quite frankly, because they're making pies, there's flour everywhere. And could they be cleaner? Yeah, they could. So again, it depends on the process, but that's really what that's about. But 5S is a tool that you can use. And again, this is not rocket science, right? It's organization. But it's just a specific methodology for that organization. And again, with the 5S, that shine piece, it's really about reducing clutter, eliminating clutter. And how many of you, and I'm going to unmute y'all because again, I feel like I'm talking to in a vacuum here. How many of you all have ever walked through a client facility that looks just beautiful and it's clean? I mean, it's not necessarily perfect, but they've got nice wide aisles, everything's organized, things are in place. Or conversely, you've walked through a client or a potential client where, quite frankly, it's really tight and cramped. There's stuff on the floor, people are tripping over things. Anybody ever worked in an example of either of those? Probably,
Yes,
huh?
one example, is one client.
Hello? Can you hear us?
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, we have several clients here in Georgia, especially two. Right now, they're focusing on 5S, and I have seen a big improvement, especially since they're slow right now because of the COVID-19. But the 5S is helping to clear the hallways, clear the aisles, put everything in a set department, set place, and it's neater and it's better for incidents, accidents, for not to happen.
It really is, and it also saves money, and not just from safety wise, but also from buying things. And again, thinking again about that pegboard thing with all the different wrenches. If you had 5 mechanics working in a shop, are you going to buy 5 sets of tools? Probably not, right? You have a pretty good sized set of tools that they share. Just and we think like that in that type of setting. But in office settings, we have a tendency to think, okay, every person's got their desk, so everyone needs this, everyone needs this, and this. In some settings, and I've been like this, and many of you may have as well, where everyone needs needs a pair of scissors, even though I never cut anything, or maybe I do once or twice, a year. Everyone needs a stapler, even though I barely deal with paper. Everyone needs this, everyone needs that. I worked in a setting where, again, cubicle farm, right? There's hundreds of people on a floor. Every single person, every time someone new came on, or they were replacing because things would break and wear out, they had like those tape things, those tape dispensers, they had staplers, they had scissors, they had all that kind of stuff for a company that prided itself on being paperless. And I was one of the people that brought up the question of, why do you need scissors, tape, and staplers for a company that's priding itself on being paperless? That feels like a waste of money to me. And they kept buying because they're expanding people. Oh, we're doing this big hire. We need to order 100 of each of these items, which is thousands of dollars by the end of the day. Why would you need to do that if you're doing that? Repurpose what you've got, or do like what those mechanic shops do, where they've got a central place. Create a central place where here's some scissors for everyone's use. Here's staplers, whatever, for every use. That particular term is actually called a Kanban, and some of you may have seen something like that, where even whether it's taped off or marked off or not, where this is where this is kept, and it's for general use. You use it and you put it back, kind of thing. You can do that in offices just like you would do that in warehouses, in shops, construction sites, whatever that may be. All right, let's see if I can get this to turn. Standardizing, and again, standardizing is important, and Carlos, you kind of spoke to that already. If you standardize things, you clean everything up and you create a standard, you're more likely to have that next piece, the sustainability. I'm going to actually, the sustainability piece of it. So standardize it. We've cleaned something, we've organized something. And again, this could be physical things, it can be virtual. If I walked through your offices and asked each of you to look at your computers, how many files would you have on your computer right now with PII? I'm sure you've all really tired of me harping about protecting PII. But if I actually looked at your computer, would you have PII on it? I bet you at least some of you do. The folks in Georgia don't get the benefit of me walking through the offices, because more than one, probably at some point, a lot of the folks here in Utah, when I walk through that, I'll be honest, when I walk through an office, when I walk through a client, that's one of the things I look for. So be aware of that. And this is an opportunity, if you haven't already, when we're done with this session, hop onto that computer and 5S your computer. 5S your desktop. Are you finding things easily? That's a really easy way just to increase your efficiencies. The more organized you are, the more efficient you're going to be. The more organized your process is, the easier it is going to be to follow. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So we're just about done here. I want to try and wrap up so I've got time for questions and just whatever. This is not, again, this is part of the sustain piece. If you're going to 5S something and part of a project, as part of your project or part of just your daily work life, you need to set some sort of audit in place. And this is just a sample sheet of, these are the different things that need to be checked. This is what we're checking it. This is who's doing it. This is how often it's done. We've all seen versions of this because you walk into a gas station or any kind of place that has a public restroom and they have a chart on the back of when the last time a bathroom's been cleaned. That's what that is. That's a form of 5S. That's that standardized thing, right? So, somebody came in and they did that. Fire extinguishers, they oftentimes there'll be a little chart or something next to them, not just a little tag on them, but the little chart next to them about how often they're checked. All things like that. Anyone else can think of an example where you've seen something where, yeah, there is checklist for something being checked and organized.
Forklift operators, they have a checklist before they start driving the equipment.
So again, that's all part of that sustain piece, and I will harp into tomorrow. We wrap up tomorrow, and y'all get to hear me really harp on that quite a bit tomorrow. So yep, whoops. So I'm going to stop there because we're done with today. But I want to stop and ask if all of you, because quite frankly, this was me just sort of snapping through all of these different tools, and all of these different things are tools. And really, I'll be honest, this is not complicated stuff. This is pretty basic. And again, think about certifying five tools if you do yellow belt, 15 if you do green. 5S is a tool. SOP is a tool. A SWOT analysis is a tool. I haven't talked about it, but brainstorming is a tool. All of these things are tools. This is the pretty basic stuff. It's just putting a specific methodology in place, learning how to use the different tools, know when to use them so that you can, get through them. And again, the point of a certification is certainly to say that you've achieved a certain standard, but then also to know how to use the tools so that ideally you'll use them again. And be able to speak to them when you're talking to clients, to employees, to vendors, to whomever that may be. Again, we're trying to raise everybody up, help everyone function at that higher level, because we've all heard the over and over again, we are not traditional staffing. Traditional staffing doesn't talk about this kind of stuff. Traditional staffing doesn't do this kind of training. So this is an opportunity. This is truly, truly, truly an opportunity. And I'm going to throw this in, even though tomorrow's the last day. I'll talk about it again tomorrow. This is an opportunity, especially, and I'll be honest, for the folks in Georgia, Kyle and I had talked about me spending time out there in April. Obviously, that didn't happen. And that's one of the things I was going to talk with Kyle about. Let's do an in-person Lean Six Sigma class for you all in April. I'm glad we still got to do it, even though obviously doing the online Zoom thing is not ideal. We could hopefully relatively soon we'll still be able to do something in person. But I like to see y'all go through this and not need it, and maybe just do it for the new folks or the people who couldn't attend. Do we have any questions, comments?
No.
Wow, so I explained everything so well that y'all are experts in all these tools.
No.
We're gonna try, but here in Georgia, we are very happy, and this information we think that is very beneficial to all of us here. And we have really enjoyed. I know we have one more day, so we're really trying to take advantage of this information that we
Well,
can.
and we need to set up more of this. And then again, for the folks who have not been able to attend, and this is for everybody, for the folks who have not been able to attend, maybe you missed one session, or you have, maybe there's someone on the staff, and particularly for those who are managing people, you know, Cindy, Carlos, whomever else may be on the call right now. If you have someone who you know has not attended, or ask, I would say ask, even if they're not certifying, get the knowledge. I would like, personally, I like to see every single person at least certify with a yellow belt. I mean, how powerful is that? And again, I'll repeat, you want this, you guys, you really want this on your resume. I promise. But
Yeah, this is very helpful information.
yeah, we want to get this, we'll get you guys going on this. And again, from tomorrow, you'll have 6 months working with me. Again, call, email, text. I'll help you work through all of this because this is really fast, really high level overview of all of these different tools. So you're not, I don't really expect you to be experts in all of them. But again, this stuff is not really complicated. And y'all are experts. I want y'all to be experts in your processes and to be able to walk through a door of someone. And if you're telling someone and a client that we're going to increase efficiencies, I want you to have that training to be able to really do it.
Thank you.
All right. Any other, all right, if there's no other questions or whatever, we're just about at time. So I will let y'all go and I will talk to you all same time tomorrow.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.